What is, in a little bit more detail, the best type?
Bismillah. What I would say first and foremost is for the viewers is maybe to look at the first part of the show again, and just to take in fully the different types of Hajj. Okay, and what is Hajj Ifrad, what is Hajj Qiran, and what is Hajj Tamattu'? What are they, and what are the differences between those three types of performing the Hajj? This is very important to go over so you understand what's upon you, what's in front of you in this journey, inshallah ta'ala. After you've done that, I would say, answering your question as to what is preferable and what is the best Hajj. Now, there are legitimate and valid differences of opinion on this. Some of the scholars are of the view that the Qiran, Hajj Qiran, is the best Hajj. This was the Hajj that the Prophet ﷺ performed. He brought along with him the sacrifice that was going to be made and performed Qiran. Now, some of the companions of the Messenger ﷺ saw the type of Hajj that he was performed, and they followed him. They did the same as him. However, when it was very close to Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ realized that some of the companions had brought their sacrifice with them, and some of them did not bring their sacrifice with them. So here the Prophet ﷺ said that if I knew before what was going to happen now, I would have done differently. So therefore, those who did not bring their sacrifice with them, those who were performing the Qiran, and they didn't have their sacrifice with them, he ﷺ said, right, what you're going to do now is you perform your Umrah. You're going to make it a Tamattu'. You don't perform Qiran, you perform Tamattu'. So you perform, because they didn't bring the sacrifice with them. So you perform your Umrah, you come out of Ihram, and then once again you will enter the state of Ihram and perform Hajj separately. This is Hajj Tamattu'. So for this reason, some of the scholars say no. Even though the Prophet ﷺ did perform Qiran, he ﷺ said that if I knew about what I knew in the future, I wouldn't have done like this. Therefore he said, ﷺ, he would have performed Tamattu'. For some reason, for this reason I should say, that some of the scholars say no, Tamattu' is better than Qiran. How, as I mentioned earlier, there is, some of the scholars have a just view in the middle, that if you do bring your sacrifice with you, then perform Qiran, that is better. If you don't bring your sacrifice with you, which is maybe the vast majority of people, then the Tamattu' would be better for you. It is not an issue for us to say, I've done this Hajj and my Hajj is better than yours. Just remember the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hajjul Mabrur, the Hajj that is accepted, not the Hajj Qiran that is accepted, or the Hajj Tamattu' that is accepted. Al-Hajj, the accepted one, laysa lahu al-jaza'u al-jannah, has no other reward except the paradise. So there's no need for us to argue over what happens to be the best. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes for you to perform Hajj, be thankful to your Lord and perform the Hajj, whatever Hajj you're performing, in the very best way that you can. That is the most important thing. Wallahu a'lam.
We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all a Hajj Mabrur.
Allahumma
ameen. For those of us who are going out this year and those who are staying and didn't get that opportunity, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to write for us a Hajj in the near future. Allahumma ameen. So Sheikhna, from your explanation, what I can understand, and forgive me if I misunderstood, that the Hajj Qiran and Hajj Ifrad are very close to each other. In fact, they're all very close, but more specifically, Qiran and Ifrad are very close. What is the main difference between them?
So the difference essentially between Hajj Ifrad, which we said is the Hajj alone, and the Hajj Qiran is the performing of Hajj, but the reward of Hajj and Umrah, but it has a sacrifice done with it, and you will stay in the state of Ihram. So as we will mention a little bit later about the pillars or the essential parts of the Hajj, there are 4. That is entering the state of Ihram, there is the standing on Arafah, there is the Tawaf al-Ifadah, and there is Sa'i. These are the 4 pillars of the Hajj. They are in both the Hajj Ifrad and also the Hajj of the Qiran. So when a person undertakes the pilgrimage, leaves the place where they entered the state of Ihram, make their way to Mecca, upon arrival, they will perform Tawaf al-Qudum. And we'll explain this a little bit later in the Sifr, or the explanation of the Hajj itself. But answering the question, very specifically, is that the rites of the Hajj Ifrad and the Qiran, that they are the same. However, with the Qiran, they will have to have a sacrifice made for them. That is the essential difference between the two.
So why would one choose Qiran over Ifrat?
Well, if they want to have the reward of a Hajj and Umrah.
Okay.
If they want to have the reward of a Hajj and Umrah, then they will have the Hajj Qiran performed, but they will have to make and pay for sacrifice. Because with the Hajj there is no sacrifice, there's no financial burden concerning that. But with the Qiran there is the financial burden of having an animal sacrificed. If you can't afford it, maybe a person doesn't have that, then you fast 3 days in Hajj. There's kind of another way of doing it. You fast, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Al-Baqarah, that if a person doesn't have the hadi, the sacrifice, they fast 3 days in the Hajj, وَسَبْعَةٌ إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ, and 7 days when you return to your home. تِلْكَ عَشَرَةٌ كَامِلَةٌ. That is a complete 10 days. That would, of 10 days of fasting, which would suffice the hadi or the sacrifice that was made for you during the Hajj. If you can't afford it financially, then you can fast in place of that.
Jazakallah khair. Going back to Hajj al-Tamattu and that period of Tamattu, and inshallah we're going to be going in another episode perhaps of what are things that we're not allowed to do while we're in the state of Ihram. But what are we able to do in that phase or that stage of Tamattu, that phase of enjoyment? Are we allowed to, for example, have relations with our spouses during that time?
Sure.
What are we allowed and what are we not allowed to?
So again, and this is very important when studying fiqh, is that you can make a tasawwur, is that you can imagine and visualize the topic that we are talking about. This is extremely important. Otherwise it just becomes just theory. Pieces of information that remain in the mind for a little while and then it just goes away, because maybe Hajj is something that maybe you'll only do once in your life and you'll forget about those things. So as usual, during Ramadan, you always get Ramadan questions. They asked the question last year, but they forgot, so they need to ask again. Likewise, zakah. It comes once a year, you forget the answer, I need to ask again. So a lot of questions, maybe you can ask it once, you get the answer, and then you don't need to ask again, because you're always doing it now. So when a person performs their Umrah, they remain in Mecca, however long that is, 1 week or 1 month. You are not in the state of Ihram. If you're with your family, you have relations with your wife, you spend time in the Haram, which is the most important thing.
Of course.
Okay, we know that the Prophet ﷺ informed us that offering the salah in the masjid is equal to 100,000 salah anywhere else. 100,000 salah is times more than any other place on earth, subhanallah. So you're in your own home, whether you're in Africa or Europe, the Americas, I guess one salah is one salah. In Mecca it's 100,000. On this issue, if I don't mind me mentioning,
please,
is this reward restricted to the masjid itself? Okay, the doors of the masjid, because this is how a masjid is known, by its walls and its doors.
Of course.
Is the reward restricted to that place, or is the reward anywhere in Mecca? There are two views on this. However, what seems to be more correct with the evidences is that the 100,000 is applicable anywhere in Mecca, not just the masjid itself. Because we know the Prophet ﷺ was taken on the night journey, and he was not inside the masjid. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Subhana alladhi asra bi abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram. Even though the Prophet was not inside the masjid itself, he was outside it. For this reason, many of the scholars have said that the entire of Makkah, the Haram, you can find the reward of 100,000 salah. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So if a person between the Umrah and the Hajj, they should offer their salah in jama'ah as much as they can, and try to be inside the masjid, no doubt. That has its own virtue. Wallahu a'lam.
Can he actually leave Mecca? For example, go visit Medina, for example, or is he confined when we're speaking about Hajj al-Tamattu? Or is he confined to Mecca? Good
question. Right. So let's say that a person arrives very early to perform their Umrah and Hajj. He wants to perform Tamattu. He arrives or she arrives and they perform their Umrah. There's a month to Hajj. I have the opportunity to go to Mecca. Medina, my apologies. They have the opportunity to go to Medina, that's right. If they do that, they go to Medina and they spend some time there, they would be required to then perform Umrah for Tamattu again, because they left the Haram area. Okay, so they would then go to Medina from Dhul Hulayfa, or the place where you assume your ihram from the people of Medina. You leave there And then when you arrive in Makkah, you perform your Umrah again, and then you perform your Hajj after that. بإذن الله تعالى.